The snow fell in thick, silent sheets that evening, muting the bustle of London's cobblestone streets. I stared at the gilded invitation lying on my writing desk, the flickering candlelight catching the embossed words. The Whittaker Christmas Celebration, a once-in-a-lifetime event. December 24th, 1935, 8 o'clock. No sender, no return address. I was a journalist by trade, though a struggling one. My stories of drab London life rarely captured the imagination of my editor. This invitation, its peculiar elegance, its mystery, was a curiosity I couldn't ignore. Whittaker Manor had been the subject of whispers for years, a relic of tragedy left to rot atop a hill outside the city. A fire had gutted its grandeur in 1920, and those inside had perished in the blaze. Since then, it had become little more than a local ghost story. Still, the prospect of unearthing something unique, a piece of forgotten history perhaps, spurred me on. By 7:30, I donned my best coat and hat, slipping the invitation into my pocket before stepping into the icy night. The manor loomed ahead, its silhouette stark against the wintry sky. The air grew colder as I approached, the trees bare and skeletal, their branches arching over the path like twisted claws. My breath hung in plumes before me, and for the briefest moment, I hesitated. Something about the silence felt unnatural, oppressive. But then, a glimmer of warm light caught my eye. The manor was ablaze with life. Candles flickered in the tall windows, and the faint sound of music drifted on the wind. A brass knocker in the shape of a lion's head gleamed on the front door. Before I could lift it, the door creaked open on its own. A butler stood in the grand foyer, dressed impeccably in a tailcoat. He nodded silently, gesturing for me to enter. The scene before me was nothing short of spectacular. The manor, restored to its former glory, gleamed with holiday finery. Wreaths adorned every doorway, garlands of holly and ivy draped along the sweeping staircase. A massive chandelier hung above, casting shimmering light over the polished marble floor. And then there were the guests. They were resplendent in evening wear, the women in shimmering gowns, the men in black tie. The air buzzed with chatter and laughter, though no one seemed to acknowledge my arrival. I stepped forward hesitantly, scanning the faces for a familiar one. None appeared young. Their expressions seemed frozen in time, their movements fluid but mechanical. My unease deepened when I noticed the music. It was faintly off-key, a haunting melody played on an unseen piano. The notes lingered in the air too long, warping unnaturally. "Mr. Greaves," a voice said suddenly. I turned to see a woman in crimson silk, her blonde curls framing an impossibly pale face. Her lips barely moved as she spoke, her eyes unnervingly still. "Welcome. We've been expecting you." I followed her into the ballroom, though I couldn't explain why. The clink of glasses, the hum of conversation, the strains of music. It was all an exquisite tapestry of elegance, yet none of it felt real. The faces of the guests were too pale, their laughter hollow. I found myself standing by the punch bowl, gripping a glass of something red and spiced. The woman in crimson had disappeared into the crowd, leaving me alone to observe. One by one, the guests moved in synchronized grace, their laughter rising and falling as if choreographed. And then I noticed the painting. It hung above the grand fireplace, dominating the room. A Christmas party was depicted in rich detail, guests frozen mid-dance, a table laden with a feast, a towering tree twinkling with candles. It was the very scene playing out before me, identical in every way. But there was something wrong. In the painting, the faces were gaunt, hollow-eyed, their smiles stretched unnaturally wide. The revelers' hands seemed to claw at each other in grotesque embraces. My chest tightened as I realized the room itself was off. Objects in the painting didn't align with their real-life counterparts. The piano was on the wrong side. The chandelier held an extra tier. I blinked and looked away, the glass trembling in my hand. "Beautiful, isn't it?" The voice startled me. A man in a white tuxedo stood to my left, his pale blue eyes fixed on the painting. His face was thin, stretched taut over his skull. The Whitakers always hosted the finest Christmas parties. Shame about the fire. "Fire?" I asked, my voice hoarse. His lips curled into a smile. "Yes. Didn't you know? The manor burned 20 years ago. Everyone perished, save for a few poor souls outside. And yet," he gestured toward the room, "here we are." I stumbled back, my breath quickening. The man tilted his head, regarding me with a mix of amusement and pity. "You shouldn't have come alone," he whispered. The chandeliers flickered, casting the room in a sickly yellow glow. The music faltered, and for the first time the guests turned to look at me. Every face was blank, their empty eyes fixed on mine. I bolted from the ballroom, my footsteps echoing off the marble floors, as if the sound itself were chasing me. The guests' hollow eyes and their synchronized movements lingered in my mind like the remnants of a nightmare. The man in the white tuxedo's words repeated in a sinister loop. "You shouldn't have come alone." The corridor I entered was dimly lit, its walls lined with old portraits. Each painting depicted a solemn face, their gazes following me as I moved. At least, that's what it felt like. The air here was different, heavier, colder. It carried a faint metallic tang, like blood on iron. I opened door after door, searching for an exit. Each room was a slice of time preserved unnaturally. A sitting room with chairs neatly arranged, a nursery with toys placed as if the children had just stepped away. The worst was the library. Its shelves sagged with dusty tomes, their spines embossed with names I didn't recognize. In the center of the room, a single book lay open on a desk. Drawn to it against my will, I approached and read the name scrawled across the page. Arthur Greaves. My name. Underneath, in spidery handwriting, was a single sentence. "You must play your part." I stumbled backward, the desk knocking against my thigh. The chandeliers above flickered, and the air filled with whispers, soft, overlapping voices. They spoke my name again and again, their tones ranging from pity to malice. A door creaked open behind me, and I spun around. The woman in crimson stood in the threshold, her lips curving into a thin, humorless smile. "You're breaking the rules, Mr. Greaves," she said. "What rules?" I demanded, though my voice cracked under the weight of my fear. She tilted her head, regarding me with mock pity. "The ones that keep us here, of course. You've been invited, and now you must stay." Her voice was light, playful, but her eyes betrayed something darker. "We don't take kindly to those who try to leave before the party ends." I backed away, but the door slammed shut behind her, trapping me. She stepped closer, her movements slow, deliberate. "Do you know why you're here?" "I don't know anything," I spat, my voice rising in panic. She laughed softly, her breath curling in the cold air like smoke. "Oh, you'll know soon enough. The manor chooses its guests carefully. Those who have something to hide, something to fear. It's all part of the game." "Game?" My mind raced, desperation clawing at me. "I didn't agree to any game." Her smile widened. "Didn't you? You accepted the invitation, Mr. Greaves. That was all it took. She leaned closer, her cold breath brushing against my face. "You have one chance to leave. Find the watch and turn it forward, but do it before midnight." "What happens at midnight?" I whispered. Her smile vanished, replaced by an expression of solemn dread. "You'll become one of us." The candle sputtered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. When I reached out, she was gone. The halls twisted and stretched as I ran, their geometry warping in ways that defied logic. The once grand manor seemed alive, its creaking walls and shifting shadows conspiring against me. My breath fogged in the icy air, my footsteps muffled by the ever-present hum of whispers. I remembered her words. "Find the watch." The ballroom painting flashed in my mind. There, amid the twisted revelry, I had seen a pocket watch hanging from the host's waistcoat. If it was the same man in the white tuxedo, then I knew where I had to go. Returning to the ballroom filled me with dread, but I had no choice. As I approached, the music resumed, a haunting off-key rendition of "Deck the Halls." The guests moved in their eerie synchronization, their faces blank, but their eyes burning with intent. I spotted the host standing by the piano, the watch glinting faintly against his waistcoat. He appeared to be waiting for me, his expression placid, almost amused. "You've returned," he said, his voice low and smooth. "I need the watch," I said, trying to steady my voice. He chuckled. "And what makes you think I'll give it to you?" "I'll take it if I have to," I said, though the trembling in my hands betrayed my bravado. His smile faltered, and the room seemed to grow colder. "The watch is no ordinary trinket, Mr. Greaves. It binds time in this place, keeping us as we are." He gestured to the guests, who now stood motionless, their hollow eyes fixed on me. "If you break it, you break the order, and that comes at a cost." "I don't care about your order," I snapped. "I just want to leave." His expression darkened. "Then take it." The room fell silent, the guests watching as I stepped forward. My fingers trembled as I reached for the watch, its surface icy to the touch. The host didn't stop me, though his eyes burned with something I couldn't place. Contempt, or perhaps pity. The moment the watch left his hands, the guests began to move, their faces twisted into grotesque masks of rage, their laughter turning to inhuman shrieks. The chandeliers flickered wildly, the walls closing in as if the manor itself were alive and furious. I stumbled back, clutching the watch, its hands ticking backward faster and faster. Midnight was minutes away. "You've chosen," the host said, his voice barely audible over the chaos. "Now see if you can live with the consequences." I turned and ran, the watch burning cold against my palm. Time was slipping away, and so, I feared, was my chance to escape. The halls of the manor twisted into a labyrinth as I ran, the walls closing in, groaning as though alive. The pocket watch in my hand ticked wildly, its hands spinning backward faster and faster. Midnight was moments away, and with each passing second, the air grew heavier, the cold more biting. The whispers were no longer distant. They hissed my name, slithered over my skin, burrowing into my mind. Shadows poured from every corner, reaching out with skeletal hands that clawed at my coat. The guests were behind me, their laughter twisted into guttural screams. Their footsteps, unhurried but inevitable, echoed through the manor, drawing closer. Ahead, the grand foyer came into view, the door tantalizingly close. My chest burned as I sprinted toward it, gripping the watch tightly. My fingers fumbled with its face, trying to turn the hands forward. They wouldn't budge, as if frozen in place by the weight of the manor's curse. The door loomed closer. I hurled myself against it, but it didn't move. My breath came in panicked gasps as I turned the watch again, desperation clouding my thoughts. Midnight's final toll began to echo through the halls, a deep, resonant chime that seemed to shake the very foundation of the manor. 12 chimes. I had only seconds left. Suddenly, the host's voice whispered in my ear, low and mocking. "You must finish what you started." I spun around to find him standing mere inches away, his face a hollow mask, his eyes glinting with malice. Behind him, the guests had gathered, their forms melting and reforming into grotesque shapes, their hands outstretched to claim me. With a surge of adrenaline, I smashed the watch against the floor. The glass shattered, and time seemed to collapse in on itself. The chimes ceased, replaced by an all-encompassing silence. The guests screamed, their forms dissolving like smoke. The host's face twisted into a grotesque snarl before he too vanished. The manor groaned, its walls trembling as cracks splintered through the ceiling. I threw myself against the door one last time and it gave way. I stumbled into the snow, the bitter cold shocking my senses. Behind me, Whitaker Manor collapsed in on itself, swallowed by darkness until nothing remained but the desolate hill. I stood there trembling, clutching the shards of the watch in my palm. The silence of the night was deafening, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't truly alone. Even now, I swear I hear faint laughter on the wind, and when I sleep, I dream of the manor. Its doors open, its halls beckoning. The painting of the party still haunts me, for in its corner I remain trapped, my face frozen in eternal revelry among the dead.